I want to say welcome everyone to our 8th Conscious Conversation, Exploring the Dreamscape. My name is Sean Moore, and I serve as the Community Engagement Specialist here at Muse, where I have the privilege of helping our Muse users and our Muse community connect to a more sustainable meditation habit. I'm excited for today's conversation, because why wouldn't I be? We're talking about dreaming. As we know, for people across cultures and various wisdom traditions, dreams have been a source of guidance, exploration, creativity, and problem solving. Today, we'll be exploring how our dreams can provide valuable insights into our aspirations, hopes, fears, and our overall well-being. We'll also develop incredible insight that's available in our dreamscape. We'll talk a little bit about research happening within the dreamscape, as well as ways in which you can work with your dream. Now, with that being said, we got some amazing folks that'll be here in conversation today. So I want to introduce you to our 3 panelists that'll be joining us today. Now, our first panelist, her name is Chanti Tacoronte-Perez. Chanti is a Cuban-American artist, author, ritualist, and non-clinical depth psychologist. She believes that images speak a profound language. She spends her time translating the unseen and advocating for the imaginal. She is currently working on her doctoral dissertation on navigating the liminal via a creative-divinatory journey as an other way to recover marginalized, forgotten, and the silenced. She teaches workshops and collaborative trainings focused on creativity, dreaming, intuitive movement, deep rest, and yoga nidra. Chanti, welcome. Super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Excited to be here.
Ooh, we're so happy. I'm so happy for this conversation because I know it's going to get good and juicy. So thank you. I'm going to invite in our second panelist who will be joining us today, Dr. Ruben Naiman. Now, Dr. Ruben Naiman is a psychologist, sleep and dream specialist, and clinical assistant professor of medicine at the University of Arizona's Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. He is a pioneer in the development of integrative approaches to sleep and dream disorders, integrating conventional sleep science with depth psychology, psychological, and transpersonal perspectives. Dr. Naiman is deeply concerned about evidence suggesting that we are at least as dream deprived as we are sleep deprived. Dr. Naiman, thank you for joining us today. Super excited to have you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have our third panelist that'll be joining us today. And I'm always excited to be in conversation and community with our third panelist, Chris Amani. Chris is our co-founder of Muse. Chris co-founded Muse with an ethos to create technology that expands our perspective of ourselves and the world around us. Chris's creative and design practice has spanned many fields, including architecture, augmented reality, computer vision, music, and robotics. Chris, thank you for joining us today. As always, excited to be here with you.
Thanks, Sean. I am excited for this one. So yeah, I can't wait for the conversation. I'm coming to you live from an airport parking lot to be on a flight in 2 hours. So yeah, just living on the edge.
Listen, we appreciate it. And that's the beauty of technology, that we can be in all these different corners of the world under different circumstances and still be here grounded for a great conversation around dreaming. So thank you. And you got your Muse device on.
I was wearing it when I was sleeping. It is early here.
Awesome.
Yeah, a bit too much information.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So as we sort of hop into our conversation, I think it's a great place to start. When we start sort of operationalize terms, right? We've been talking about dreaming. We're sort of in this space. I'm sure folks signed up because they are curious about dreaming. But I think a great opportunity for us to sort of enter this conversation is to maybe develop or highlight a working definition of what dreaming actually is. We know that there's tons of research, books, all sort of things out here for us to sort of idealize what dreaming is. But for my experts that are here on this panel, how do you define dreaming? And I'll leave this one open, whoever wants to hop on in for us.
I'll jump in, Sean. I think we have to respond to that, we have to begin by considering there are two relatively distinct avenues of research and perspectives on dreaming. One of them is the study of REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is primarily a biological or a physiological approach, looking at what goes on in the brain and the body during sleep. And it's very relevant, but it doesn't capture the whole thing. It reduces dreaming to a brain activity, which I think is limiting. And the other is a perspective that looks at the dream. And again, these are two relatively independent bodies of research. I have in my work over the past many decades looked at triangulating the two, the question of what do we get when we bring the two together? And I think it's important to recognize that the brain does not dream. The body does not dream. The brain and body have experiences that are correlated with dreaming, but dreaming is a personal experience. It's a direct experience. It's subjective. Okay, so we say the brain sleeps or the body sleeps or the brain dreams, the body. It doesn't. It goes through parallel experiences, but dreaming is a personal experience. And fundamentally, I would say what dreaming does is it expands consciousness. It allows us to recognize that there's more to us than we typically recognize. So some of us might remember R.D. Laing's work, who said the range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts. And so dreaming it's this humble invitation to expand our territory, our sense of self.
A humble invitation to expand our sense of territory. And so,
Yeah, I really like that.
Go ahead, Chanti.
Yeah, I really like this idea of humble exploration even. And I agree that it's definitely very personal and very subjective. I was thinking about this question about what is dreaming, and I find it to be I think about it as a collaboration with all of ourselves. So sometimes we are, we're a parent, or we're a researcher, or we're a dancer. And dreaming allows us that place or space or relationship to have a conversation with all of ourselves, maybe not necessarily at once, but it feels very dreamlike when all of a sudden you're in a conversation in a parking lot, in a van. I think that's very dreamlike to have Chris in a parking lot, in a van, in this kind of personal space, even as we look in this Zoom screen. But I love the idea of it being a collaboration with all of ourselves, and possibly with those selves or that unknown that is not present during our right now waking time or waking environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the perspectives shared here. I love this idea of a collaboration. I think that's particularly true in the case of lucid dreaming, and the collaboration is really tangible there. But also, this idea that we become in touch with parts of ourselves which are otherwise difficult to access. That seems to be an apparent part of dreaming, in my experience. So I love that aspect too, and that is, living is a collaboration, and to what extent can we be in touch with and include, as much as we can in our consciousness. I think another thing that just sort of came up to me is this sort of distinction between dreaming and the brain activity or the body. We associate REM sleep with dreaming, but we do dream in other stages of sleep as well. So I think that's quite interesting. I think, most often when we're recalling dreams, it's from the REM stage, but we do dream in other stages of sleep. And I think there are some differences which are people are studying, which is quite cool.
Yeah. And, I always like to share this. We try to source our questions from our community, because hey, the folks that are tuned in, they have particular questions that they want to know. And I think it's a great place for us to pull that. And probably the most frequently asked questions out of all the folks that registered was the question of what is lucid dreaming? I want to say this was probably by 80% of the participants here. What is lucid dreaming? Anyone want to sort of help us shape sort of how we can approach this conversation around lucid dreaming?
Yeah, frankly, I'm quite interested in why that's the most important question that comes up. It says something to me about our culture and our perspective on dreaming. I am concerned about something I call wake centrism, which is a bias in consciousness where we believe waking consciousness, what we're experiencing now, is the premium of consciousness. And from that perspective, I think there's a tremendous misunderstanding, a biased understanding of what sleeping is, what dreaming is, what altered states of consciousness is. We live in a wake trix, right? And I think recognizing that, again, begins to give us an opportunity to expand outside of it. So, and lucid dreaming is fascinating. It's something I've been interested in and practiced for a long time. But I think there's a dark side to it. And maybe that's too strong a word. And the dark side is we want to control the crap out of everything. Even out of dreaming. And dreaming, the way it's often looked at today is it's a resource, the dreamscape is like a landscape and we can go out there and we can mine it. We can dam up rivers and generate power. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of creative resource energy available in the dream. But I think what we lose sight of is that there's an intelligence in the unconscious. And then we can learn to trust it. It's as much about allowing the dream to take us someplace as it is about our taking the dream. So, and the last thing I said is in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a really interesting, long established perspective on dreaming, including lucid dreaming. And they importantly distinguish the notion of awareness, becoming mindful of a dream state versus controlling it. And they generally discourage the approach to control. So I just want to open with that. I know there's more to say about this.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for putting that. And until you said that, I'm like, yeah, we do want to control a lot of things. And I see that in the fact that we want to sort of control this process of dreaming. Chanti, do you want to hop in here?
Yeah, I really do agree with this idea of, and I think lucid dreaming also gets this bad rap because it's this controlled, or whoever is not lucid dreaming and wants to lucid dream wants to do it because they want to control their dreams. But the reality of it is in these, ancient traditions that use it as not only an awakening in the dreaming state, but an awakening in the aliveness or the wake matrix. Is that what you call it? The wake tricks? I love that. The wake tricks. But also the Toltec Mexique tradition uses it as another spiritual practice to wake inside the dream as a bridge to be wakeful in the Watrix. And in that liminal space of the bardo, when we move from the state of living to the state of whatever happens when we're no longer in the Watrix breathing or in the dreamscape, sleeping and dreaming. And so I think maybe it's the number one question, because maybe as a culture and as a community, we might be ready to wake up in our conscious, alive, open-eyed, and we're just interested in how we do that. And as somebody who does, I find it very, I find it as a sense of really of connectivity and as a place of relationship when lucid dreaming can happen and when we're not in control of it. It's almost like, wow, this is amazing. Like the first time you're on a mountain and it's just snowing here. So you're just like, wow, it's just fresh snow. And all of a sudden you have this like new experience with this other place. So I hope that we are excited about lucid dreaming because we want to be awake in all of our different states of consciousness, not just because we want to control the heck out of everything as well.
Yeah. Chris, you want to add anything here?
Well, I think my connection blanked for a moment, but I just don't know much to add. And I really do agree with what's being shared here, that to sort of reposition how we think to leverage our dreaming, that we have to be productive in every aspect of our life, and this desire to be in control all the time. I think that's a really important perspective, because I think the opportunity to receive, to be open and to receive from our dream states and from our subconscious is such a precious thing. And it's interesting that lucid dreaming, if you're learning to lucid dream, generally when you first discover that you're aware of the fact that you're dreaming, and you desire to like seize control of the wheel, it wakes you up. And I think in some ways it's kind of like, an incredible mindfulness practice to be in that seat of awareness, to not seize control and allow things to unfold as they will, and not interfere. So I think there's an incredible opportunity there to practice this non-interference.
Yeah, I think that's key.
Go ahead, Chanti.
I think that's key, and that space of curiosity really is what, at least for me, what keeps me in that lucid space. I'm just like, ooh, this is really interesting, and not so much like, let me do this now, although that's exciting too.
Let me add to it. I think one of the differences between waking and dreaming, and I see them on a continuum, is that waking is informed largely by intention. When we're awake, we have varying levels of things that we want or need, and that informs the shape of our consciousness. And dreaming is informed largely by reception. We are open to or receptive to, and that's also based on a willingness to trust the unconscious. And I think we are in an era where we've been taught not to trust the unconscious. If you go back to Freud, who believed that the center of the unconscious was the id, in German, das Es, he called the heart of who we were it. Das Es is German for the it, versus later perspectives that looked at the soul or the heart of who we were as an inner child, for example. So I think we need to reconsider and soften our relationship with, reconsider the unconscious. And that raises a lot of interesting issues too about bad dreams, right? And nightmares, which I think we'll talk about.
Yeah. I want to actually take it or pull on a thread of a conversation, Ruben, that we had in our initial sort of connection. And I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this idea of us being maybe in a dream deficit, right? And I think it connects to, I would go ahead and say, our second most asked question, which is, why are some dreams easier to recall? Or, and even rephrasing this from the perspective of folks asking whether, if I can't recall it, did I actually dream, right? And so there's this real energy around wanting to sort of figure out or connect to their dreams or recall. But I wonder, does that connect to your perspective that we are in a dream deficit in that way? Care to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you for raising that issue. It's a deep concern of mine. Just as dreaming expands consciousness, the loss of dreaming, I think, contracts consciousness. I think pain in general, whether it's physical or emotional pain, contracts consciousness. We all know this when we stub our toe, suddenly the whole universe shrinks down to that big toe, because we know there's a pain message that's going to come up from it, versus expanding our consciousness. But there is really strong evidence suggesting that we are at least as dream deprived as we are sleep deprived. And most of us are aware of all the media attention we've had over the past 2-3 decades about sleep deprivation. It's a really critical issue. And let me just say too that I don't think we can ever fully understand sleep without understanding dreaming, and vice versa. I think we need a better understanding of sleep. I'm a member of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, and my complaint has always been it should be the American Academy of Sleep and Dream Medicine. And without going into detail, I'll tell you, I've gotten in trouble for that. So the evidence is that lifestyle factors, which include medication, a lot of psychiatric medication and other medications, interfere with REM sleep. The most commonly used psychiatric drugs, most antidepressants, most anti-anxiety agents, and other drugs significantly interfere with REM sleep. So they're blocking some of the physiological channels to dreaming. Alcohol, which is excessively consumed, in my opinion, in this world, and also cannabis, which I think has some very legitimate recreational and medical uses, is excessively consumed. Both alcohol and cannabis interfere with REM sleep. If we cut our sleep short, which tens of millions of people do, because the brain prioritizes sleep over dreams, we're actually cutting our dreams short. So when you begin to look at it that way, and then you add to it the fact that most people believe that dreams are sort of incidental and unnecessary. In fact, one of the most common uses of the word dream in America for decades has been in the term the American dream. The American dream refers to a house. It's a home. Nothing wrong with that. But we've reduced dreaming to the material world. So all of that adds up, and the data suggests, and I wrote a paper for the New York Academy of Sciences about this, that we are at least as dream deprived. And the last thing I'll say about this, and I think this is such a critical issue in sleep medicine. We know that tens of millions of people have insomnia, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And people do their best to get sleepy, often using substances or medication. The bottom line here is the bridge between waking and sleep is dreaming. And this is just a fact. It's not an idea, it's a fact. We have to go through at least a brief hypnagogic dream state to get to sleep. And if we're not comfortable with the dream, which millions of people are not, they'll react to it and they'll pull back into awakened consciousness.
Mm-hmm. I think there's like another aspect too, just in terms of the dream deficit, that, we get most of our REM sleep in the second half of the night. So if you are not getting much sleep in your nights, then the thing that you're really sacrificing by sleeping short is a lot of REM.
If you wake up with an alarm clock most mornings, you're never getting enough dream time. It's sort of like you're watching a great movie, and then suddenly in the last 5 minutes of this great film, they turn the projector off and usher you out of the theater. That's what the waking up with an alarm clock does. You're snipping off the end of your dreams. And Chris, by the way, I want to just say I appreciate your mentioning, because I think it's very important, that we dream, our dreams are most vivid and most visible in REM sleep, but we dream outside of that. And I would say we dream all the time. The dream world is there all the time, although most easily accessed in REM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it does, there's evidence that suggests that the nature of our dreams changes depending on what stage of sleep you're in. And so there's been some interesting research into that in the recent years. Yeah, there was another thing that I wanted to say, and that was that, there's, one perspective on dreaming is, especially REM, is a very emotionally connected process where we are, reprocessing the emotions of our life and our days, and doing a reintegration based upon that. And so when you suffer from too little dream, like REM dream sleep, I mean, the way that you feel yourself being affected can be related to the fact that you haven't done that emotional processing. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, you might be familiar with Rosalind Cartwright's work. She spent her lifetime researching the impact of dreaming on healing emotional issues. And we know that dreams downregulate negative emotion. So we do feel better after dreaming. It kind of recontextualizes the emotion. So, there's an old notion that we're probably familiar with, that dreaming is an out-of-body experience. From the perspective of the mind, when the mind is encased in the body, it's limited in terms of motor output and sensory input. My consciousness is shaped by being in a body. When we dream, the mind is no longer in the body. It's an out-of-body experience. And I can be much bigger. I can walk through walls. I can fly. I can traverse time. So there's a healing there. But there's another level of healing. And there's a very common notion today that the body and the mind are one. in the Center for Integrative Medicine where I work, this is a common belief. And I've come to believe it's a mistake. I think the body and mind are a mixed marriage. And just as dreaming from the perspective of the mind is an out-of-body experience, from the perspective of the body, it's an out-of-mind experience. So prefrontal executive function controls the body. We, the mental state, we're the captains of our body when we're awake. When we go into a dream state, it's not just the mind, that the mind is out of the body, but the body goes through what we call an autonomic nervous system storm. It actually goes through these shenanigans. There's a dysregulation of core body temperature, of heart rate, of respiration, of all kinds of things. It's as if when the mind leaves, the body shakes itself out. What's also interesting is doesn't matter what you're dreaming about. It can be a nightmare, but the body gets sexually excited when the mind leaves. It's what the body does. It's how bodies connect, right? So the benefit to dreaming is not only a downregulation of negative emotion, it gets those emotions out of the body. It gives the body an opportunity not to hold on to, not to get sort of cramped up as the muscles do with that emotion.
So kind of a reset there.
It absolutely resets, it re-regulates, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also really interesting to explore those emotions that maybe one can't explore in this waking time, to have them available to us in this body mind in and out movement that happens in the dreaming space. And I think I want to add to your sleep and dream bridge, the bridge of resting as well, because I think that we kind of wait till the last moment to go to sleep and then to dream. And we don't necessarily know how to do that because we're on in the Western world, for the most part, we're on all the time. And as much as we have a dream deficit, which I completely agree, in our waking space, I think one way, I'm just looking a little bit in the chat, people who can't or don't recall their dreams, they sometimes feel left out. And I think the waking space and imagination is a wonderful kind of bridge as well. So that as much as we want to, go into this place of nighttime and dream and sleep and relate to our emotions, we can practice that and relate to it in the daytime with imagination and leaning back and going back to this ancient ritual of looking at the clouds and imagining the different shapes of it and what it can be. So maybe your the Sleep Research Foundation that you want to add dreams to, which I totally agree. We can also add rest to and imagination to.
You're talking yoga nidra, yeah?
Yoga nidra, or really just imagination, just like leaning back and imagining the possibility of anything, really, imagination in general.
What's interesting in our world is in terms of the transition from waking to night or sleep and dream consciousness, is we've excised, we've sort of surgically removed twilight. So we think of all living things as being diurnal, awake during the day, or nocturnal, awake at night. But there are many creatures that are crepuscular.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how many people know that word. I love the word crepuscular. It's used a lot in other languages, and French and Spanish, but it refers to dusk and dawn.
Yeah.
Now, dusk and dawn for many of us in the Western world has been replaced by rush hour. Right? We're in a hurry at those times to get things started or get things wound down. But crepuscular consciousness is interesting. If we didn't turn on the lights when the sun went down, we would go into a waking dream space. And this is part of the continuity, of course. There'd be dreamlike features to waking consciousness. That makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. They want to stay tethered and waking where they feel in control. It always reminds me of Castaneda saying that what dreaming does is it gives us the fluidity to enter into other worlds. by destroying our sense of knowing this world. And that happens every day when the sun goes down. The world, this lit up world that we know that we're comfortable with, it gets destroyed. And so we have to be willing to trust that there's something beyond that deconstruction, that coming apart, that delivers us to a new place.
And I think that you're speaking to uncertainty in general, which is very scary for a lot of us. But that, you know, and even just speaking to this idea of crepuscular, I love that. I know the word in Spanish, but twilight, that's a great time to just stop. I'm an artist, so when I was studying East Indian art, it was a time where we couldn't do anything. Twilight was just like, don't do anything, just like have some tea and not do anything, because it's so shifting and so changing and so portal-like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the part of the question that you posed initially, Sean, was just around if I'm not remembering my dreams, am I having dreams? And I think it's quite important to say that you are having dreams, even if you're not remembering. I think for many who maybe don't remember their dreams so much, it's often when we're disturbed in a REM stage, for example. So prematurely interrupted, that we tend to see back into the dream world. Whereas when you complete that sort of 90-minute sleep cycle, and you're back in that kind of near waking state, out of the dream state, and you wake up at that point, those are natural points to wake up. It's quite common not to recall your dreams. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And then the other thing is just, I really love this idea of this sort of continuum, from waking, into dreaming and sleep. And I was always very inspired by, the Tibetan, dream yoga practices, where you actually maintain your consciousness as you fall asleep, sort of descending that thread, into the dream world, and staying conscious the whole time. Something I've only experienced a couple times in my life, but really interesting to ride, right through those, those liminal hypnagogic states and into dream, with awareness the whole time, and seeing that there really is a continuum there that you can become aware of.
Chris, I'd love to add to that, to continue to ride that into the hypnopompic state. The question of remembering dreams, Rumi has a beautiful poem that says, "The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep." It goes on and talks about this opening between where two worlds meet. And if there's a simple trick, if you will, to remembering dreams, it's reconsidering what we call grogginess. So grogginess, the term grogginess in English comes from the British rum drink, grog. And the suggestion is that we awaken drunk, right? And get some coffee or take a shower or something, wake up. But the truth is, grogginess is an exquisite hybrid state of consciousness. It's part sleep, part dream, and part waking. It's this weave of consciousness. In fact, it's a whole consciousness. So learning to respect grogginess and waking up and lingering in grogginess, I think, is the most helpful way to stay connected with the dreams. When Rumi says, "The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you, don't go back to sleep," I think the word sleep there means unconsciousness. Just stay aware, stay mindful, stay conscious. And what happens if we practice lingering there, the dream shows up. It's because it's there already, but we're keeping our receptivity keen and open to that. So waking up slowly, and this is difficult for people, getting rid of the alarm clock, I think, is one of the best things we can do to enhance the quality of our culture.
At least once a week, at the very least, because I don't know how life would be if I were to wake up with an alarm clock. I 100% agree. But the reality for a lot of people is that there is one. So, but there is more practice. If we do follow that all the way through all the states, then we can wake up at whatever time we want to and desire to wake up. So we can set that intention at night as just a practice, and not set the alarm, and see what happens in the morning. It's oftentimes like when we're at the airport, we're waking up all of a sudden just because part of us knows that we need to be somewhere. And so turning off that alarm clock and being that like lingering liminal space, it's like the whole dreamscape is around you. And I do know, I'm going to say yes to myself, that we do dream, even though we don't recall the dream, because sometimes I'll fall back asleep and I'll try to remember that, that like taste of the dream and the fragrance of it. And then when in that kind of in between groggy, liminal space, it's like, I know the taste of it, but I don't know what it is. And if I linger long enough, then the taste comes and you're like, that's it. It's there. And it's an image and it's a song, or it's a feeling or a sensation. It's not just a visual. I just want to say that because I know a lot of people say, I don't remember like the visual image, but you might remember a different kind of texture of the dream as well. And I would include that and say, and as an offering, say, I'm remembering the texture of this dream. And that might be enough to continue your recall and to offer the dream a remembrance. For me, it almost feels like enough. It's enough to dream. I just want to say that.
I really love the language you're using. I think that so often when we try to recall dreams, we try to see them,
Yeah.
And I mean, you kind of need to come in sideways and really just get back into the feeling of it. And I love the words of like taste and texture, and not really trying to like bring back that vivid imagery. And, every time I try to do that, it doesn't work, but every time I just allow myself to just reconnect with the feeling and be okay with whatever arises, in that kind of state of mindfulness, then, things start to flow back. And there's a couple of
trying is what gets us away.
Yeah, right. Don't try.
Well, it's intention that pulls us back into the waking world.
I think that takes us to. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just gonna say there's like a couple other like important little things to know if you're interested in recalling dreams. I mean, one of them is that if you work on recalling dreams, you get better at it. I mean, that's absolutely. And then the other one is not moving your body when you wake up. Since that is part of that state of feeling. I mean, I'm sure you both have a lot to say on that, but I mean that is well known that if you don't move when you wake up, that generally it's a lot easier to step back into that dream space.
Right. Most people will actually begin to turn. They'll change position in bed when they wake up. We recommend that they go back to the last position they were sleeping in, where they experienced trematonia, loss of muscle tone, and the dream is right there. Yeah,
that's an important point.
Yeah, I would say, I've test driven both of these because I've heard this, and it's not my experience to be very still, but the lingering kind of turning, or that kind of like soft wave-like motion, because sometimes when we say don't move, people get really rigid. So a stillness of not rigidity,
stay in the flow.
Yeah, you stay like you're floating on a wave, rather than like stiffness.
Thank you.
I think that's a good transition to the next question, Chanti. I want to sort of talk about this idea of like building healthier relationships with the idea of dreaming. And like, you mentioned this idea of, and I'm a testament of that works, this idea of like not waking up with an alarm clock and sort of setting the intention of when you'd like to do that. You also mentioned this idea of, shifting the way we're perceiving our dreams, right? Coming back to the texture, the feel, the smell of what we are sort of leaning into. What are some other practices, techniques, or even rituals that can help us sort of in this sort of recall space?
Well, I think these kind of bookends or twilight stages of, going to sleep and waking up. In those spaces, for me, it's really important to bring in any kind of ritual. And, we don't need to do anything else. So don't think of this as like a to-do list. But let's say like we like to read before going to bed. Some people will say, oh, that's terrible, don't read. And other people will say, oh, yes, read. I would just say, whatever it is that you're doing, make it more dreamlike. So if you're reading, don't read like, I wouldn't read a mathematical, like logic, book on logic, but I might read some poetry, or I might read, I might read somebody else's dreams, or, and this whole idea of like scrolling, if we tell people, take the phone out of the room, yes. And sometimes a phone and that security feels really comfortable, and we can sleep better because the phone is right there. So I would say, look at things that are dreamlike. Look at, have, some pictures next to your bed. Look at a deck of like beautiful images, or some kind of like something that feels dreamlike. And waking up, some of us are going to be really good at like recalling, and we'll have like a dream journal, and we'll like put it under our pillow and like write in the morning. And some of us are like, oh no, I have to do another thing. I have to write something. But, I mean, just acknowledging and being in relationship to that space is going to bring that space more as part. Anything we put our awareness in, anything we, we put our love and our attention and our awareness to, it's going to respond back. It's like, if you haven't recalled your dreams and you want to form a relationship, you might not just write a text to your, dream friend, but you might write like a love letter, before going to sleep, write a love letter to your dreaming selves. Be like, I'm so excited to get to know you. And then when you wake up, you might, wake up, and instead of trying to remember the dream so rigidly, you might be like, well, what did the dream feel like? And you might like move your body. You might move your body to go to the bathroom in like a dreamy space. I can't tell you how many times I've recalled the dream when I'm just like, how was I moving in that dream last night, And I'll like move my body to the bathroom, and I'll be like, oh, wow. And I'll run back to the bed and write it down, or make a sketch of it. So really, it's not necessarily all these practices are good. Everybody's going to have their own opinion about it. And as, Dr. Neiman said earlier, it's personal. So even these rituals or these routines that we bring to the dream recall, I like to think of them as an offering to this space. And then as a relationship, we'll have like a conversation back and forth with these different images, feelings, textures. So whatever it is that you're doing, and however you want to personalize that, let it be dream-like, soft, fluid, everything away from the wake tricks. The less wake tricks it could be. I'm so borrowing that word. I love it.
You're reminding me, and something in the chat also reminded me. So there's a distinction between what we call daydreaming and what Jung had called the waking dream. And daydreaming tends to be intentional. I'm sitting in a boring board meeting somewhere, but I'm off in Kauai, so I want to get away from where I am. The waking dream is not. The waking dream is about trusting that there's this underground river. But in terms of experiencing the dream in the world, I've written about dream eyes. I think another definition of dreaming is a way of seeing.
Yeah.
And we all know how to use dream eyes. We've all dreamt lots and lots and lots. And kids can do this easily, and we can learn to do it as adults. We can pretend we're dreaming. Just pretend we're dreaming right now. And then suddenly everything starts to shift in a very subtle way. Things are less rigid, things are more expansive, things are less defined, they're more mysterious. We bring curiosity to it. So yeah, I like the idea of living the dream when we're awake. And really, these are moments where we're letting go of pretty harsh intentionality, of what we call hyperarousal, excessive wakefulness. And it's an easier way to live too.
It's so much easier. I totally agree. I guess that what you're expressing right now is really like how I define imagination. It's like seeing with these eyes that there's so much possibility in the world. Yeah.
And the world behind the world.
And
yes.
the world behind the world. All the worlds.
All of the worlds, yes.
I want to throw in a very biased question because it's a practice that I love and hold dear, and it's also a question that was asked in the chat, particularly. But Chanti, there was a question asked around like, how does a practice, and I know we've sort of dropped it sort of in this space, how does the practice of yoga nidra support dreaming?
Yeah, well, this is, we can have this conversation for a long time, but I will say that yoga nidra allows for a presence of that in-between state to be, for us to experience that. So sometimes, yoga nidra is a practice for a lot of people, but it's also a state of consciousness, and in the East Indian traditions, also a goddess. And so this practice, the technique of yoga nidra, allows us to start to become more conscious without rigidity through these states of waking, dreaming, sleeping, and then re-waking, or hypnagogia, all of those. So yoga nidra can be that practice as a technique to help us kind of weave what that might look like and be more present. And I will say, if we are not rested and we are not sleeping, just sleep and rest. And don't try to stay awake in all these stages because it sounds cool. Sleep, rest, fall asleep, pass out, enjoy it. And then when that feels like really you have like a good bank account, your sleep and rest account is really full, then explore those ways, because we get really excited about these, conscious things. And if we're not full of the experience of sleep and rest, it's actually not going to be helpful. And so yoga nidra gives us that kind of doorway to say, here, rest for a while, the technique, rest, sleep, and it gives you that space of like, oh, wow, something just happened. I just had an image, or I just had a sensation or a memory or a texture. And then the way that some of us teach, it's like, oh, we write that down. So it almost becomes like this kind of dream recall, or we have an experience after meditation, and we do a self-inquiry practice, and we just kind of take some notes, or we move in that way throughout the day, and we keep that field of meditation throughout. So that's to answer your question succinctly and quickly, Sean.
No, that was great. So Chris, I want to toss it to you, because I know that Muse is doing some amazing research in the space of sleep and dreaming, brain waves, and all this space. You want to talk a little bit about that, maybe what's happening, what's on the horizon around that?
Sure. And I'll also try to keep it short, because there's a lot to say. And I just wanted to say, though, like, one thing that really I have loved about this conversation is, the perspectives that you offer, Chanti and Ruben, this reverence and care that we can bring to our sleep and our dreams. And I think that's so important, because, I think for many people, sleep becomes a problem to solve, and if you're, or something to, and if that problem solving isn't going well, we become stressed, and then the whole thing devolves from there. And I think that, there's such an opportunity, when we sleep, to really open to ourselves, to love ourselves, and to bring that reverence and care to ourselves and our creative selves. So I really love, what you've been sharing, and I think it's so important. And I say this also first because, Muse, we build a tool, and we're working on tools for dreaming, and I think in there can be an opportunity for the curious exploration, using a tool to help you explore your consciousness, but there's also a danger in there too of chasing after the cool conscious thing, and really not, taking that, seat of reverence with respect to yourself and your the deeper layers. So with that being said, I mean, the things that we're building are a set of tools to help you explore, the different dimensions of sleep. And generally the way it works is, Muse, as everyone knows, provides biofeedback, live during meditation, or we have these experiences to help you go to sleep. So, one thing that we can know through looking at the EEG signals, the brain signals as you're sleeping, is, how you are transitioning through the different known sleep stages as it goes through the night. And, we can build experiences to participate with those. So, one simple experience that you can leverage, this is the tool that we're building, is when you're falling asleep, when you're going through that hypnagogic state, and you go into a deeper level of sleep. Stage 2 sleep is typically what we use. This is when you go from kind of that semi-conscious state into that kind of unconscious, like not memorable moment where like you sort of pass within. And what we can do is detect that event and bounce you back out of that with sound of some kind, and those sounds can be very subtle, in which case, you can kind of like, sprinkle some auditory fairy dust into that hypnagogic state, and experience whatever that manifests. And then, if you go into sleep, we can bring you out of that, and help keep you in that hypnagogic state. So I think, there's been some pretty well-known examples of, I think Thomas Edison had this, holding something in his hand, and when falling asleep, when you reach that stage 2 sleep, your hand opens, maybe it's a ball, falls down, crashes on a plate, wakes you up, and suddenly you're peering into that, that trippy dreamscape, and that can be an opportunity for creative exploration of those dreamy moments. And so, technologically, that's something that with Muse is really quite easy to build, because we know that instant in time. So that's one thing that we're creating. There's another thing that we can do when you're actually in a dream state, and the one that we're using right now is REM. So if you're in a REM dream sleep state, we can actually provide an auditory stimulus that is, let's say, small enough such that it's not waking you up immediately, but there's an opportunity to present sounds that may be included in that dream experience. So you're providing some environmental context, and we can choose what we might want to experience while we're in that dream state. So we can sort of paint into our dreams a little bit with sound. And then you have an option at, after some period of time, you can bring yourself out of sleep with a stronger sound that is going to rouse you, and you have that opportunity to peer back into your dreams and see what happened with that auditory painting. So that's another kind of experience that we're building. And then the one experience around lucid dreaming that I think a lot of people who would love to learn a lucid dream look for, and that is something to help produce a recognizable sound while you're in a dream state. So basically you train yourself to become accustomed to it could be words like, oh, you're dreaming in this moment, and we can present that at a time when we know you're in a dream state. And so these are like the 3 different kind of classes of experience we're working on. As a caller to the community, we would love anyone who's interested in this. You want to be part of our testing. There's a lot of questions around, well, what sounds do you want to hear? What would you want to do with it? There's a lot to play with here and investigate. So yeah, we're very excited about these things, but also just held, with, in that care of like, hey, you don't necessarily want to go messing with your sleep, but also like, what an amazing opportunity to start exploring, like, what happens if I'm going to like provide like a stimulus at a certain point, in my sleep, to discover what's going on for me then. Anyway, so that's kind of the things that we're working on. But even Muse as it is right now, I mean, I just share a little experience that happened yesterday. I woke up very abruptly from a dream. I recall being in my dream, and in the dream came to a very abrupt and surprising end. And it's just like, wow, like what just happened? And I woke up, went to the bathroom, and then I looked at my phone, because I was going to stop my session so that I could actually take a look at the data that instant, because it was very strange that I woke up like this. I was very curious to, have our research team look at that data. And I saw that someone had messaged me at the instant that I woke up. And I keep, my phone on do not disturb. It doesn't make any sound in the bedroom. But there was this moment of like, wow, like what was the order of events here? And so we dug into this, and what I discovered is that WhatsApp doesn't give you like sub-second accuracy of message arrival time. But at 5:37 a.m., someone left me a message, and I had an abrupt end to my dreams, with no sounds in the bedroom. And so anyway, it really brought up a lot of curiosity, and just how, interesting it is to have a piece of technology that you can actually look into that and say, like, what happened at least in the order of events in time? When did I wake up? What were the things that might have been happening in my field of emotional awareness, or, however we're connected? There's a lot of questions for us to be able to start to look at it in different ways when we have access to some of this information.
Yeah. I'm just we're right at 1 o'clock, and I'm just gonna put this in the atmosphere. I feel like at some point we're gonna have to just do a part 2 to explore the dreamscape, because I feel like there's so much more to.
Well, I really want to
dive
hear
into
from you both on some of these ideas that we're working on. So I really hope there is a part 2, Sean.
I think it's so cool to have like even your own audio like tell you something in the middle of like your like whatever it is that you use during the day, like to say like, hey, in your own voice. For me, that would be like, whoa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how hard it would be to have that function where you can actually record your own audio snippets, and have that be, whether they're affirmations or just an inquiry, or who knows how you want to, participate and play with your own experience.
If I could add just quickly, I've worked with many thousands of people over the past many decades, and we are a select group of people because we've been drawn to this work, and we believe that there's this mystery and value in exploring these other states of consciousness. My experience is that most people don't, that the culture distracts us from that. And I think a tool like Muse is essential. It's biofeedback, but it's an amplification. It allows people to bring a magnifying glass to look at their own unconscious. And that direct experience, it's not book learning, but just to come in contact with the wisdom, the intelligence of their own unconscious, their own dreams, I think is invaluable and so essential today.
Thanks, Ruben.
I feel full from this conversation, full of excitement and possibility. There will definitely be a part 2. We got to continue this conversation. There's clearly a lot of interest in the dream space. What I will say, as Chris mentioned, sort of joining this or learning more information about what's happening with Muse and dreaming, there's a link in the chat. If you scroll up a little bit, there's a lot in the chat. I dropped a lot of things in the chat. But there's a link that says, essentially, take this quick survey, let us know what you think of the event, and join the Muse Dream Beta. If you look at our evaluation form, there's a portion on it that says, hey, I'm interested in joining the Dream Beta. Make sure that you share your email in there so that we can reach out to you to circle back around and let you know how that process will go. But we also really want to know what you thought of this event as we continue to do more and more opportunities like this for our community, and also just connect around really, really important information. The other thing I dropped in the chat is the information about our amazing panelists. There is information about Chanti, how you can get in contact with her, and also a link for a free digital dream journal with 6 practices for dream recall. So make sure you click that link. It'll also be in the follow-up email. Same for Dr. Ruben. His contact information is there, as well as an article that he wrote that's titled In Exile from the Dreamscape. So some good reads, great practices, and some amazing information for you to follow up as you continue to explore the dream space. I want to say thank you, Chanti, Ruben, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time out today, for being in community and in conversation. Y'all got to come back, please.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Watch your dreams tonight. They'll be commenting on this conversation.
I will be interested to see what that looks like after this sort of conversation today.